And welcome to another exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us. I'm your host, Michael. And with me is a guest who I met on LinkedIn. So I'm branching out there, getting guests from new locations. And this guest has such experiences and background that when he approached me to come on the show, I was like, oh yes, definitely gotta get this scheduled, and I'm so happy that we got to get this done. And one thing I will say before I turn it over to you is, from my show to you, thank you so much for your service. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
And with that being said, I now have the privilege, the honor, and blessing to introduce you all to my guest, Paul Dale Roberts.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me on your show. So I'm very excited to do it. And you can hit me up with the first question.
Well, the first question would be is, for those who are not familiar with the terminology, can you explain what a Fortean Investigator is, and also tell a little bit about yourself for those who may not recognize your name or...
Okay, well, Michael, a Fortean Investigator is a person who investigates all things paranormal, from UFOs to demons to shadow people, cryptids, ghosts, you name it, we investigate. If it's paranormal, it's outside of the norm, we're there to investigate. So that's what a Fortean Investigator, and that derives from, like, you probably go to Barnes and Nobles and you'll see Fortean Times. And Charles Fort was a person who was very, very curious. And he was curious about the paranormal. And that was all things paranormal. So the word Fortean comes from the individual known as Charles Fort.
That is very cool. And for the full transparency, as we were discussing that backstage and discussing that I could call myself a Fortean podcaster because I like to have a show about all things paranormal, just like he was saying, investigating. So that's very cool to learn a new term to describe oneself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're a Fortean podcaster. So you have a new title there, Michael.
I will wear it with pride. So what got you started into the paranormal? Was it your dancing, or how did that come about?
How much time do you have, Michael?
I have as much time as you want.
Well, it all started off when I was a child. I lived on Effie Street in Fresno, California, and that house was haunted. Or it was my childhood imagination. The things that were happening to me, if I was laying in bed, and mind you, Michael, I was a little boy. I was laying in bed and I would see these skulls with wings fly into my room. There was a night that I heard these rolling wheels coming down the sidewalk and approached my bedroom window, and my window raised halfway up. And there was what looked like a tea kettle, a black tea kettle, and the snout pointed towards me and blew out this gas. I started hacking and coughing. My mother comes into the room to give me some cough medicine, and it turned out to be poison. She ran when she realized it was poison. She took me into the bathroom and made me vomit all that stuff out. Um, the entity actually pushed me into the heater and burned my leg. And there was one time I was looking out the window and I heard a very soft voice, and it sounded like my mother's voice. And she was going, Dale, come here, calling me by my middle name. Dale, come here. It was an orange grove. And I don't know what would have happened to me, Michael, if I had actually went into that orange grove. Maybe I would have vanished or disappeared. Something would have abducted me. I don't know. But I was so scared, and I actually thought it was my mother. But I ran into the kitchen, and there was my mother. So the entity was trying to entice me to go into that orange grove. So as I got older, I was very curious about the paranormal. I said, did that really happen to me? And as old as I am now, Michael, I'm 69. I can remember it vividly. It's almost like it happened yesterday. And so I started reading books on the paranormal. I would take these paranormal books, along with some comic books, up to my treehouse, and I would read Brad Steiger's books. Brad Steiger is a legendary author on the paranormal. So I became very knowledgeable about the paranormal. And some of the kids in the neighborhood, they would come up to the treehouse and they would bring their Playboys. And they said, hey, Paul, you want to read one of our Playboys? No. And they said, all you're doing is reading comic books and paranormal books. I said, that's what I'm interested in. I don't want to look at the Playboy books. So as I grew older, I became very knowledgeable about the paranormal. And at the age of 18, I joined the Army. I was an MP, military policeman, and they had a huge narcotics problem in Germany. They had a thing called the khaki mafia, and it was run by a sergeant major and a colonel, and they were distributing drugs. They had prostitution, all kinds of illegal things. So they needed some MPs like myself to work undercover. So I was working undercover narcotics with the Drug Suppression Team, CID, Criminal Investigation Division, and went all throughout Germany buying drugs. And I would testify at Article 32s and court-martials. This is where I gained my investigative skills of interviewing people and seeing if their story is consistent. So that helped me to become a paranormal investigator. But little did I know that I was going to be a paranormal investigator. So I got out in 1976. I left Germany, got out in 1976. They put me, my life was in danger in Germany because I was busting so many people. I was busting GIs, and I was working with the German Kripo in busting German civilians who were dealing narcotics to the GIs, to the soldiers. So they put me at Fort Hood, Texas, and I was under General Patton Jr., which is the son of General Patton, and with Second AD Hell on Wheels. So one of the things I remember about General Patton, he came up to me, he was inspecting the troops, and he looked at my boots and he says, Paul, did you, no, he goes, Roberts, did you polish your boots with a Hershey bar? So it was like, oh my God, I don't want to piss this guy off. But anyway, I got out in 1976. And when I was working undercover narcotics, I would go to discotheques to bust these drug dealers. And I would watch people dance. And I said, boy, I could probably do that. And before I knew it, I became a good dancer. So I became a good dancer in Germany. And so when I got out, my first job was with Aurthur Murrays. So here I am. I've become the third and fifth disco king in Sacramento. I'm dancing, doing all this crazy stuff. And I danced 205 hours, 8.5 days for the Guinness Book of World Records. And I was featured in Ripley's Believe It or Not. So 1979 comes along, and they had this demolition crew that destroyed all these disco records. Disco died. I was performing on stage, and I was performing with Jeff Kutash's dancing machine, and we were the first number to share in Harris Tahoe. So I met Monty Rock the Third. I met Wolfman Jack, Cher, so Suzanne Summers. I met a lot of celebrities during the time when I was a disco king. But in 1979, disco died, and I got booed off stage, and people were wearing T-shirts that said "Disco sucks."
Wow.
So disco days were over with, Michael. So I went to a movie theater, and I'm sitting there watching James Bond, and I was thinking in my head, I said, I wonder what those military intelligence guys did. So before I knew it, I was talking to the Army recruiter, and before I knew it, I was signing on the dotted line. I was going back into the service. So I became a 97 Bravo, an intelligence analyst with the military intelligence. I was with the Photo Interpretation Center in Korea, and I worked with image interpreters, and they would identify a little dot as a T-72 tank. And on one particular day, and the reason why I went into military intelligence is to see if military intelligence knew anything about UFOs. And we call them UAPs now, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And on one particular day, Michael, 6 photographs came in. And those 6 photographs were taken from our reconnaissance satellites and reconnaissance aircraft. There were 6 photos of UFOs. One photo was a UFO that was globe shaped. The next one was disc shaped. The next one looked like a fireball. The other one looked like a boomerang. The other one looked like a cube. And the other one looked like a triangle. And on the back of each photo, it said intelligent movement. So that told me that military intelligence back in 1981 was investigating UFOs. And even though that Project Blue Book closed down in 1969, the military was still had its hands in the cookie jar. They wanted to know what these UFOs were. And each picture was part of a video. There's a video out there. So my job was just to give it a number. Each photo said intelligent movement. And I gave it to the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. And they gave it to the CIA. And during that time, when I was with the Photo Interpretation Center in Korea, I had a top secret SBI clearance, special background investigation. And on another particular day, Michael, another photograph came in. This time, it wasn't a UFO. It was a picture of what looked like an American being escorted by 2 Vietnamese VC in the jungle. A POW in 1981. And later on in the newspapers, it said that special forces knew all along that we still had POWs in the 1980s. So eventually, when we got reconnaissance photographs, let me tell you the routine how we did it. Okay, so me and another guy from military intelligence, we would be in a black sedan. In this black sedan, there's a play card that says, "Do not stop this vehicle for any reason at all." All the South Korean police, all the MPs, all the police whatsoever knew our vehicle going at high speeds to Osan Air Force Base. And my friend who was driving the car had one part of the combination to the trunk of the car. I had the other half. That's how you open up the trunk. Inside is a suitcase. He has the other one half of the combination. I have the other half. You open up the suitcase and you put the hot rolls, that's what it's called, hot rolls, into the suitcase. Those are your hot rolls are from the reconnaissance satellites and reconnaissance aircraft, taking all the pictures of North Korea and Red China. And then from Osan Air Force Base, we zip on down back to Seoul, Korea, Yongsan Barracks, the PICK Photo Interpretation Center, Korea, and dump those photos. So that's how we did it. After I left that, I became an OP4, opposing forces instructor, and I taught the Soviet threat. And that's including the WEF system, a wings, engine, fuselage, and tail section on how to kill aircraft, tanks, you name it. And also, too, I had to teach all these different special forces like the 101st Airborne, 82nd Airborne, Green Beret, Delta Force, you name it, Navy SEALs, on how to use AR-47s, AKS, which is a modified version of the AK-47, SVD sniper rifle. I had to teach all these special forces people how to use Russian weapons. And I became Corporal Dabowski. I had to wear a ski mask, Soviet uniform, black gloves, and pretended I was a Soviet defector. But a lot of those special forces guys, they realize, hey, that's that soldier. That's, he's an American soldier. He's impersonating a Soviet soldier. So anyway, that's when I got out in 1986. I've always been a pretty good writer. So, and I love comic books. So I became a comic book journalist. I was reviewing comic books. I interviewed William Shatner, Stan Lee. Stan Lee is such a nice guy, let me tell you. So I was interviewing comic book creators. I was being published in comic book magazines. So I was a comic book journalist. And then one day, hey, Ghost Hunter, I'm finally coming to the end there, Michael. Hang in there. Hang in there. Okay, so anyway, I met this ghost hunter, and she said, "Hey, Paul, would you like to go?" She goes, "You're a good writer, blah, blah. I read some of your stuff. Would you like to write a story about our investigation at the National Hotel?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "What are you guys doing?" She goes, "A paranormal investigation. National Hotel's haunted." I go, "Yeah, why not?" So I tagged along. I interviewed some of the ghost hunters. I wrote the article, and it was published in 2 British magazines. And the owner of the time said, "Oh my God." She goes, "How would you like to be a permanent member of our team and be our ghostwriter, our journalist?" I said, "Yeah, why not?" So I left the comic book business. No more was I writing for comic books. And I started writing paranormal stories. And I still write paranormal stories. I work for Phenomena Magazine. I work for Paranormal Underground Magazine. Outer Limits magazine, and Costa Rican Times. I also too publish books. I have 173 books out there. And if you guys don't believe me, just Google Paul Dale Roberts books and you'll see them all. And I was a paranormal investigator. I investigated 2,500 places. And uh, it's because I'm so curious. I want to know what's going on. I've done UFOs and everything else. I've investigated Area 51, Skinwalker Ranch. Skinwalker Ranch. Not the actual ranch, but the valley where the ranch is at. Um, um, I've always been curious about the paranormal. So even though I wasn't a paranormal investigator, during my travels, and I've been like 59 countries and territories, I would go to the most haunted places like the Tower of London and stuff like that, or the bridge over River Kwai in Thailand, just to see if I would experience anything. And Michael, that's how I became a paranormal investigator.
That is incredible. And I gotta say, when you say you danced 205 hours,
8.5 days.
Yeah, how many breaks did they give you?
Oh, the breaks. Okay, check this out. So, first off, I attempted the record with 79 hours. And they had all this paparazzi taking my picture. Everybody thought I had the Guinness Book of World Records. Well, come to find out, my breaks were too long. They were 15 minutes. Guinness says it can't be 15 minutes. It has to be 5 minutes to every hour. And this guy learned about my 79 hours because I was the first one to attempt the disco dance record. And he did 183 hours. And all the newspaper people came up to me and the paparazzi, and they were saying, "Are you going to beat this guy?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to dance 8.5 days, 205 hours." And I had a 5-minute break on every hour. If I had to do a number 2, I had to do it during the 5 minutes. If I did a number 1, people followed me to the restroom. I had to have witnesses, and I had to keep my feet moving while I'm doing that number 1. If I was eating, they fed me on the dance floor, and I had all these restaurants representing me and feeding me on the dance floor. I had a very muscular German woman. If I was ready to fall out, she would come to my rescue, hold me tight, and I would have to keep my feet moving and dance with me. But then at some point in time, I would say, "Let me go." I got my strength back, and I do it again. And that's how I did the world's record.
So, did you get any time to sleep, or?
Oh, it would have to be a very quick one, 5 minutes on every hour. So, I mean, uh, not really. I didn't get any time to sleep. And also, too, Michael, if you Google Wikipedia disco, I actually made disco history. You can scroll down to where it says dancing, and you'll see me there. Sacramento, Paul Dale Roberts, Disco King, dance 8.5 days. Yeah, it's all there.
I am in awe because I'm trying to picture how your body had the stamina for 8.5 days.
I know, and a lot of people.
Breaks.
Well, my dad came and watched me. He goes, "Son, are you using drugs?" No, Dad, I used to bust people for drugs. Why would I be using drugs? No, I don't use drugs. I just had a lot of stamina. I was top notch in shape. Um, I could just do it, so.
I wonder if your military training and work I'm sure you did long hour stakeouts, so maybe that helped your body condition to say, hey, we can go this long without sleep.
And also too, I was partying every night, and the disc jockey Bob, what was his name? Bob Lawley, and he's the one that got me to do the marathon. He says, "You got so much energy. You're dancing to every single song. You're dancing till 4 o'clock in the morning." He goes, "You ought to do the Guinness Book of World Records on disco dancing." So Bob Lawley, the DJ, is the one that actually got me in there. And if you want to see what I look like as a soldier, this is one of my books. And
Oh.
as you see, I was a skinny little guy. So anyway, but yeah, but that's how I did the Guinness Book of World Records.
And to think, after doing that, you were like, well, let's teach dance at Aurthur Murrays.
Yeah, and also too, I was doing dance shows at Club Lido, and Club Lido is now the Grand Island Mansion off the Sacramento River. And at one time, these two rich guys owned that mansion, and they had Fleetwood Mac going to one of their parties in a helicopter. So the helicopter would land, and Fleetwood Mac would come out. The tubes would be playing music inside the mansion, and then they would have me doing a dance show with all these different celebrities and stuff.
Man, that sounds like you were living the actual true high life without
Yeah,
side effects.
I definitely had fun. It was fun. It was, yeah, seems like yesterday.
So I'm kind of curious. You mentioned, investigating a few places. What location, like bridge over River Kwai or Stonehenge or Prague, which one sticks out to you as like that one was your favorite?
Area 51 was pretty interesting. um, as we got there, I brought three investigators with me. Uh, the people at the Illi Inn were very hospitable, and they had us go ahead and set up our tents in their parking lot. So that was very nice of them. And one of the guys brought out his ATVs. I think that's what you call it, an ATV. And we followed him into an abandoned village at Area 51. And this abandoned village, they didn't understand why it was abandoned, but for some reason, it had to do with the military. And they said a lot of the houses were haunted. So we did an investigation there, and I did get some EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon. So the place is definitely haunted. One of the houses, they had a little bird inside, and I became the big hero and got that bird out the window. And so it's like, hey, you did a good thing. Um, we scanned the night sky all night long when we got to the parking lot. Two of the investigators saw some objects in the sky. I call them starlight UFOs, and they were moving erratically. I didn't see it because I was busy inside the bar interviewing people.
I thought you were going to say inside the bar having a drink.
no, no, I had to keep a clear head, so I was interviewing people. We went up to the gate at Area 51, and I was looking with my binoculars up on the hillside, and I see this guy in camis, and he's looking at me with his binoculars. So I'm looking at him, he's looking at me. And then, as I was watching him, he pulls out a sniper rifle, and he's pointing it at me. And I go, oh,
I bet.
yeah. And I said, we need to wrap it up. No, 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 this is interesting. And I said, there's a sniper out there, and he's pointing his weapon right at us. Okay, as we were leaving that gate area, um, two other investigators claimed that they saw a UFO over on the hillside. Again, I didn't see it because I was concentrating on the road. Um, we took some dirt samples for a UFO group, and they analyzed the dirt sample, and they said that the ground out there was eradicated, and they don't know why it was eradicated. And also, too, they found little tiny wires in the dirt, and they don't understand what those wires were. Back at the Illi Inn, I interviewed two people. One of the people claimed it was a guy, and he claimed that he worked at Area 51. He says that they would transport him in a bus, and the bus would have blacked out windows. He says on that bus was Bob Lazar. He said that he vouched for Bob Lazar and said he actually worked there. At the Illi Inn, they even have a picture of Bob Lazar on the wall because they said he worked at Area 51 at S4, back engineering UFOs. So he vouched for it. He says he doesn't know what kind of work, because you have to have a need to know. When I was with military intelligence, I worked in this one little room, and a guard would take me into that room. The next room over, I didn't know what was going on over there because I didn't have a need to know. So I knew everything was happening in this one room. I'm working with image interpreters. We're doing sit maps. We're figuring out if those are training exercises or is there going to be a war. So that was my job. What was happening in the other room, I don't know. So the same thing with this guy that was interviewing. He was said, I know where I was located at. I know what I was doing, but I don't know what Bob Lazar was doing. But I do know he was working at S4 Area 51. So that was very good. I got that information. The next thing, and George Knapp actually tweeted that we were actually doing an investigation at Area 51. So a lot of people were listening to me to see what the outcome was going to be like. One of the other people that I interviewed was this woman, and she said that on one particular day, she heard all these sonic booms. Okay, well, that's natural because they're out there experimenting on aircraft. So you're going to hear sonic booms. And then she said this small craft came to her eye level, and there was a pilot there, a human looking pilot, and he waved at her and smiled. And then all of a sudden, his craft zipped up into the air and practically just vanished. So that was interesting, and she swears up and down that she actually saw that. So that was my experience at Area 51, which I found very fascinating. Got to meet some great people. A lot of people I talked to, and I'm trying to get information about Area 51, they didn't want to talk about it. I know some things, but I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to get in trouble. I go, okay, whatever. But I talked to the one guy, the one lady, and I got that information.
No, that's incredible information. And what's interesting is a lot of the people that I've watched doing interviews working Area 51 said the same thing. Everything was compartmentalized. We don't know what anybody else was doing. The bus was darkened out. And so, yeah, it's interesting you brought up those facts because it's like, yeah, that validates what other people were saying there, whether they were there or not, but I don't know. But it's interesting, that they had the same story. And the other thing is, when you say the lady saw a humanoid looking person in the craft, I have been talking with a lot of people about star races, and they say there are quite a few that do look human. So she very well could have seen an alien in a craft.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing the world we live in and the amount of stuff going on around us that if we'd only take a moment to stop and think and look at, how much would we be more aware than we are?
Oh yes. I believe, Michael, that we live in a big multiverse and there's so many alternate type of realities and everything else. The universe is a very mysterious place and there's so much to explore, so much to learn. There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because one of the places that you have investigated, I wonder if because of the way it looks from the air, if it could be a portal to somewhere else, and that's Stonehenge. We assume it's a calendar because of the way the alignments are, and we assume, it was built for this purpose, but we really don't know. And so I was curious with you investigating there, what was that like, and how did you even get permission to investigate there?
Um, I didn't get permission to investigate Stonehenge. Um, at the time when I went to Stonehenge, they actually had a fence around Stonehenge because some people were doing some graffiti, so they had to make sure they stopped that. I heard now the fence is gone. Um, when I say I investigated it, I just did like a little bit of outside work. One of the things that I read is this guy brought some dowsing rods to Stonehenge, and he pointed the dowsing rods at Stonehenge and received an electrical charge. And the charge was so big, it made him fall down backwards. So I brought dowsing rods just to see if that would work because I actually believed that story at that time. So I tried and tried and tried, nothing. I didn't get anything. So that was actually my little investigation. I was there, and that's what I did. Um, my ex-wife at the time was with me, and she goes, "I'm tired of looking at these rocks. So let's go down to London." She wanted to go shopping. So that that was the end of my investigation, Michael, of Stonehenge.
Wow.
Oh, also too, I was looking because crop circles are sometimes seen by Stonehenge. So when I was riding on the bus, the tour bus, I was looking for crop circles, but I didn't see any crop circles.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's funny how, like, you call yourself a Fortean investigator. You went from investigating Stonehenge to investigating shops. Uh,
God.
so, where are some places out there that you know of that are haunted that you're like, I want to get there? Because you've done the Paris catacombs, you've done the bridge over River Kwai, which I find very interesting because a lot of people only think of that as a movie.
And Michael, check this out. A lot of times when you investigate these places, you know, not all the times things happen. So I've done a lot of investigations where we absolutely got no evidence. Um, spent a lot of time investigating and nothing. So it just all depends, you know. And then, you know, and what you watch on ghost hunting TV shows, you know, and it seems like every single episode they get evidence. To be honest with you, I've worked a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. It doesn't happen that way.
No.
No, it's BS. To be honest with you. And the public who watches it, they buy into it. So, you know, which is kind of sad. I've seen some things when I've done my investigations. There was a case that I did in Citrus Heights, and till this day, it blows me away. And it's actually better than Stonehenge. I mean, I've done Jack the Ripper, Kwai twins, East Indian. I mean, East London's candlelit tour. You know, and it feels depressing when you go to the murder sites of Jack the Ripper and stuff like that. But what happened in Citrus Heights, which I'm going to tell you, blew me away. It made me a believer of the paranormal. And what happened was, I was a new paranormal investigator. I took these paranormal investigators in training, which I call scouts. I took 15 of them to this home in Citrus Heights in California. And I put 5 in one room, 5 in another room, 5 in another room. And 10 of them in 2 rooms were falling asleep because nothing was happening. And then I go into this one room with 5 investigators, and you can hear a little girl giggling. I said, wow, do you hear that? And they go, yeah, we're recording it. I said, she's no more than maybe 2 feet in front of me, sitting on this corner of the bed, but I can't see her. They said, yeah. And I heard a giggle again, and I put my head down. I go, hello. And she goes, hello. I go, holy. I can't say the word. I said, oh my God. I said, let's get everybody in here. So we conduct this seance in this room. All 15 scouts are in there. And as we're doing this seance, you can hear the little girl giggling. There's pounding on the walls. Then there's scratching on the wall, and it sounded like the Cenobites from Hellraiser going through the walls. And all 15 scouts are running out the front door. And I had to get them back. And I said, you guys got to come back. I said, this is like a breakthrough. We got to continue on. So they were reluctant to come, but they came. So we're all sitting around doing the Ouija board thing. And I don't do that anymore, but we were playing around with the Ouija board. We're doing the seance and everything else. And we had 3 walkie-talkies on the floor, and they're all on the same channel. And then all of a sudden, one of the walkie-talkie turns on and says, there's a man's voice, and he goes, get out. All 15 are running out the door again. So the occupant looks at me. She goes, Paul, I have to live here. She goes, why don't you send him home? She goes, I'll tell you what, you're welcome to spend the night in this bedroom. I said, I can? She goes, yeah, you can spend the night. Okay, so I sent all the scouts home. I go, okay, get out of here. So here I am in this bedroom. They got the video camera going, and I fall asleep. And on the video, you can hear some tapping noises on the headboard. You can hear a woman's voice saying, Paul, Paul, Paul. You can hear a man's voice mumbling. And at the foot of the bed, you can hear a child moaning. And I slept through the whole thing. In fact, you can't even hear me snoring on that thing. So, that investigation at that Citrus Heights house blew me away. I became a total believer in the paranormal. I said, okay, paranormal is real. Because I was starting to have my doubts. As a paranormal investigator, sure, I heard the EVPs and stuff like that. But I wanted something, some real proof. I wanted to see something, to experience something, to make me a true believer. And I became a true believer. And after 2,500 investigations, I've seen only 4 full body apparitions. Only 4. So it's a rare thing. So when you're watching these TV shows and they're going, oh my God, this is happening, blah, 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 and this is happening. And it's every single episode BS. It's BS because it doesn't happen that way. All the investigations I've been to, there's so many times that just nothing happened, or you find natural causes.
Right. And one of the things I like to point out is if you remember ghost hunters, when they, in the very beginning, were doing their shows, they would say day 1, day 2, day 3. So you realize this is like a week's worth of footage combined down to an hour. So, but a funny story for you along the same lines though about the TV shows is there's a city near here, Jefferson, Texas, that's well known for being haunted, and they embrace it. And we were on a ghost walk, and me and my ex co-host, we were walking along, and we had identified ourselves as paranormal investigators, the only 2 on this walk. So we're thinking, okay, this will be interesting. I stopped to take some photos in a courtyard of a house. And this guy walks up to me and goes, oh, what'd you find? And in my head, I want to go, well, my camera is telling me there's an orb here, there's a spirit here, there's, a child over here. But what comes out of my mouth is, I have to put it on a computer to analyze it. I don't know what it is, what's there. I was like, this isn't TV. Nothing is instant.
No. Michael, have you ever heard of living ghosts?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, let me tell you. Chicago, Illinois, 1974. This couple, they move into this house, and around about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, they would see this man manifest and walk over to the couch, and a woman would manifest on the couch. And then he would approach the woman and slap her. And then they would dissipate and disappear. They would vanish. This happened a few times. And one particular day, they had a block party. And the host of the block party, he says, yeah, we do this every year. This is the way the neighbors get to know everybody. They said, these are our photo albums of past block parties. Would you like to look at them? And the lady goes, yeah, I would love to look at it. So she's thumbing through it. And she goes, oh my God, this photo here. She goes, this is the man and woman ghosts that haunt our house. And the host looks at the picture. And he goes, what? He goes, yeah, they did live in your house. And they had domestic disputes. The police were there all the time. But they got a divorce. The man, the husband, lives 5 blocks down the road. The woman lives out of state. They are both very much alive. They can't be ghosts, but they are. And the reason why they are, because they're living ghosts. There is so much negative energy that was thrown up into the atmosphere that it replays itself over and over and over again. And Michael, we've had cases of living ghosts. One of our cases, isn't a living ghost, but it was the case of Emily. Emily is a ghost, and she's known to drain your energy. So the occupants of the house were saying that their energy was always being drained by Emily, the ghost. So we did an investigation, and one of my investigators goes, "Paul, I need to sit down, or I need to lay on the bed or something because I feel really drained." And I go, "Wow, I wonder if Emily's doing that to you." So I said, "Emily, if you're listening to me," I said, "kiss my investigator on the lips." And 3 of us are snapping pictures. And when we looked at the pictures, there's an orb on his mouth. And I said, "Emily, that was cool." I said, "Listen, if you're listening to me again," I go, "sit on his lap." So we snap a photo, and there's an orb hovering over his lap. That right there told me, and this is where I got it from military intelligence, intelligent movement. So what I do in my investigations is sometimes I'll put my hand on the wall, and I say, "If you're listening to me, appear by my hand." And they'll snap a photo, and there's an orb right in my hand if that house is haunted. Otherwise, there's nothing on my hand except my hand. And another thing to determine if something's paranormal, we had a case over at Del Paso Heights, and I snapped a photo of the backyard. And I noticed I had 2 designer orbs. Designer orbs are those orbs with intricate type designs in there, and sometimes you can make out a face. So I had these 2 designer orbs in the photo. And as I enhanced it, the photos look like dogs. And so I asked one of my investigators, I said, "What do you see in that photo?" And they looked at the photo and they go, "I see 2 dogs." I said, "So do I." So I went back to the occupant and I said, "What is it you have in your backyard?" And she goes, "I have apple trees." I said, "Besides the apple trees, what else do you have in your backyard?" And she goes, "Oh, my 2 dogs are buried back there." I go, "Okay." I said, "Why don't you take a look at these photos and tell me what you see?" So she's looking at them, and then all of a sudden she starts crying. I go, "Why are you crying?" She goes, "Paul, those are my 2 dogs." And boom, that was something I can deem as paranormal, because she's validating the fact that her 2 dogs that are buried back there in that backyard are in those photos. And those are the designer orbs.
Those are the experiences I think as investigators we all live for, to have those kind of moments. And it's kind of funny, I was recalling a past experience on an investigation where you're talking about the orb with Emily. Was we were sitting in a jail across from a hotel that was known to be a brothel in Ballinger, Texas, the Old Park Hotel. And in the jail, we're sitting in the common area. And all of a sudden, the left side of my face starts getting really warm, tingly. my left leg is starting to feel pressure. And Dan Lefebvre, who owns Old Park, was there investigating with us, and he looks at me and he goes, "Are you okay, Michael?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm feeling like," and he goes, "You realize you have a ghost in your lap, right?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." I was like, it was just so, it was like the tingling and my leg just feeling that pressure, but it was like physically nobody around me. And I was like, I cannot explain why or how that happened. And I wish I had documented it, but being the person in it, I don't know how I would have documented it.
I think you just documented it on your podcast.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I mean, experiences happen all the time around us. And that's the one thing I want to get across to people who say, like, I'm afraid of the paranormal or I don't understand it, is don't look at the word paranormal. Think of it as just an experience you had that you can't explain. That's paranormal.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Oh, and also too, um, dogs do have spirits, and this is my dog that died recently.
Oh,
Um,
I'm sorry.
thank you. Uh, his name's Hypey, and he was a canine paranormal investigator. He was very in tune to ghosts. So we would take him to cemeteries, or if we're investigating a ranch or something where I could bring a dog, I would bring him along, and boy, he can spot out those ghosts. Um, we have another dog now um, to mend the healing, help us heal, and she's really good, and we're teaching her how to be a ghost hunter.
Yeah, I have two that I live with, and a couple years ago, October, I lost my dog who,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, he would be like my in-house paranormal investigator, but I never took him on an investigation. But these two, as you were saying, taking them on an investigation, I was like, nobody would hear a thing if I took these two. They are constantly barking.
Oh, no. That's amazing. Yeah, animals, I tell you, I mean, I love the animals that come to my house. I mean, I have two dogs, Irie and Champagne. Champagne's a Chihuahua. Irie is a Shih Tzu. And we have squirrels that come to the house for peanut butter sandwiches. We have opossums that come to the house. We have raccoons come to the house. Um, and yeah, opossums, raccoons, squirrels. Oh, feral cats. We have feral cats that swing by. So I love animals, and they do have spirits. They do have, when they depart, they do have a ghost that wanders about. So,
Yeah, I can tell you when I had two Lhasa Apsos when I was growing up, and my dog that recently passed was a miniature schnauzer, and I can hear, even though it's carpeted in the area, because it sounds like it's in the hallway of my house that I was in at the time, was carpeted, but I would hear their nails. Like they were on the hardwood floor trying to get their grip, racing to say hello. And I would always pause, and I would pause the TV and I'd hear it and be like, "Oh yeah, that's just them saying they're here." Because I'm like, it's carpeted. There's no way a dog could physically make that sound on carpet.
hey, Michael, I was going to ask you, do you like time travel?
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well, there's a book out now by Tim R. Shorts and Sean Castile. And I have 3 of my stories in here. And it just came out. It's a very good book. It's called Weird Time. And in this book, I talk about the Morberly Jourdain case in Versailles, where they walked into a green fog. They found themselves back in Renaissance France. They believe they saw Marie Antoinette. They were interacting with a strange little creature with a black cape, a funny hooked nose, wrinkled skin, and a terrible smile. So, and then when they walked back into the green fog, it was a time slip. They were back into their era in the 1930s. So I talk about that. I also, too, talk about my ex-brother-in-law, Captain Crazy Jeff Boschel, and he lived in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, with my sister Sharon. And the movie Captain Ron, they say, is based on him because Captain Crazy Jeff, just like his nickname, was very obnoxious. He's a very obnoxious type sailor. And he had a boat called the Orion. And he was also too the boat mechanic for Morgan Freeman. And he would take tourists to different islands on his boat and everything else. But anyway, he had a time slip. He needed to get away from everybody, and he went to an island, and I believe it's called St. Bartholomew or something like that. And it's in the Caribbean. And he was taking a nap on the beach, and he wakes up from his nap, and he looks around, and he thinks there's a movie being made on the beach because now there's this huge wooden boat. There's these people that are dressed in 17th century costume, and they're loading crates into the ship. And Captain Crazy Jeff was very, very tired and watched it for a while and said to himself, well, it's got to be a movie because they make a lot of movies in the Caribbean islands. So he dozed off. And when he woke back up again, the ship, everything was gone. So as he reflected on that incident, he started thinking, was that a time slip? Did he actually somehow went back into time and saw that? So that's one of the stories I have contributed into this fantastic book. So if you ever run into it at Barnes and Nobles, yeah, pick it up. So.
Yeah. And I'm kind of curious. I wish he had stayed awake because I wonder if the people loading the boat and on the boat ever saw him.
Yeah.
Because that would be, if they did, they'd start, came over to see it, or like, tried talking to him, then I could definitely say, yeah, that was time travel. That was a time slip.
And also, too, if you have a time slip and you go back into the past, I do not believe that you're able to actually interact. Yeah, with the people in the past because you can't change the past. And as Morberly and Jourdain in Versailles went into the past, it seemed like they were not able to interact with the people that they saw, except for the one character that seemed to notice them wearing the black cape and the funny nose and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think you're a ghost in the past. So if you were to time travel into the past, you would be like a ghost. Nobody could see you. Nobody can interact with you. You'll be walking around and just observing. So that's my theory on it.
No, that makes sense because, yeah, I mean, as many warnings as we've been told, I don't know if they're true or not, but going back in time and stepping on an ant could alter the future. It's like, how do we go back, in time and see things without interacting or, interfering? And that, kind of puts the question of, can we go back in time and say, alter history to where, say, World War II doesn't happen? And if how you're describing it is the way it happens, then no, everything in the past is fixed and it is what it is. So, in a way, too, that's a blessing of, hey, it's done, it's over, learn, move on. Don't don't get trapped in it.
Absolutely, Michael. Absolutely.
So we're a little bit over the hour. Do you have time to go a little bit more, or do you have somewhere to be?
Uh, just when I get off of here, I'll just be walking my dogs. So, yeah. But yeah, I can go on for a little while.
Okay, well, I was curious of one thing, and it's something I've puzzled with being paranormal investigator. Is we come across people who are gifted, and by gifted, I'm talking about the clairaudience, the psychic mediums, you know the more in tune with the supernatural side. And you mentioned being married to a medium. What is that like?
Oh, it's interesting, Michael, but um, I can't discuss it with her because she doesn't like her information out there. So I have to keep it on the down low. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. I was just gonna be like, do you win any of the arguments? Well, I could respect that. And so one of the things too is, um, you mentioned in Prague coming across a headless Knights Templar spirit. What was that like?
Um, no, I actually that's what I was investigating. Um, there's there's supposed to people have cited a headless Knights Templar in Prague in this certain area of the city. So I went to that area, and the only thing that happened to me because there was some cobblestone road is I felt like I was being kicked from behind, and I was thinking, "Wow, was that the ghost?" But it wasn't the ghost. My When I was walking on the cobblestones, I injured my foot, my Achilles heel, and it was all red and swollen. So, yeah, so that was my experience in Prague. I didn't, I mean, I was there, but I didn't witness anything really of the paranormal. I thought what my injury could have been paranormal, but thinking about it later, I feel that it was because of the cobblestone road that caused my injury.
Yeah, cobblestones, if you're not used to walking on them, you got to be careful with those. So, what was the bridge over River Kwai like?
Okay, very depressing. There was a lot of murder, torture, suicides over there. Um, um, so as you went there, and they also too they have mannequins dressed up as soldiers who are injured and stuff like that. Very depressing place. I mean, you have a feeling of dread when you walk in there. So uh, yeah, I believe that everything that happened there, all the torturing, the murder, suicide, and everything else, all that stuff is still in the atmosphere. and you feel it. So you feel it when you walk through there, and that's my impression on it.
Do you feel like because they have the mannequins there set up to keep the story alive, that that's what is keeping the energy like that, or
No, you can feel the depression. I mean, I'm not a psychic or anything, but I could feel the depression in places like that. Tower of London, since you walk in there, people were tortured, murdered, suicide, everything. People getting beaten up and whatever. You can feel the negative energy in that atmosphere. Um, when I did an investigation of Richard Twitton Chase, aka the Vampire of Sacramento, serial killer. One of the houses, there was 5 family members there. They asked him, they said, "Why did you select that house?" He says, "Because they kept the door open." So if they had locked the door, they wouldn't have been slaughtered. But he went in there and slaughtered them. One of the ladies was pregnant, and he killed her. And as we got there and being around that house, you can feel the depression. You can feel the horror that that family faced when they met up with that serial killer. And that serial killer was so sick. I mean, he would take the head off a bird and drink his blood. And that's why they call him the Vampire of Sacramento. And also, too, there's like a little half wall by that house. And behind that wall, as he was watching that house and watching those people to see if they're going to leave the front door open, he was defecating at that behind that wall. So yeah, you can feel the depression, Michael. It's pretty sad.
I wonder, do you go to many military sites of like tragedies and stuff and investigate?
Every military installation is haunted. Why? Because you have training accidents in which soldiers lose their lives. So when I was at Fort Hood, I remember a tank running over a soldier who was out sleeping in the fields because he was sent out to the fields. He was taking a nap. Here comes the tank. He didn't hear it. The tank ran over him. So you have training accidents. You have suicides. People who don't want to be in the military and they commit suicide. You have murders. Fort Hood, Texas. Oh my gosh. You had you had that love triangle where that man and that woman killed the guy's girlfriend, whatever. You,
Right.
you had that. You had that one guy who was a major, but he had a philosophy and he believed in what terrorists were doing with the 9/11 and all that. And he killed, I think, like 14 people, shot them all down. He was an active shooter at Fort Hood, Texas. So, I mean, you have so many killings, murders, and suicides and everything. Every military installation is haunted. And that was my experience. I've been to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Gordon, Georgia, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Fort Ord, California, Fort Huachuca, Arizona. All those places that I visited, they were all haunted. There was always stories about ghosts.
I wonder, with you pointing that out about Fort Hood, is it possible that the people may have been affected by something that's there that kind of drove them to do that? Or do you think, no, there's the energy that's there can't control the people like that?
No, what the deal is just death. When you have a place where there's a lot of death, I mean, things can happen, portals can open up, different type of entities can come through. Um, the people who were brutally murdered, let's say at a fort, um, come back and why was I killed? They're confused and stuff like that. And the place becomes haunted. I think before Fort Hood was there, it wasn't haunted, unless there was something happening on the land. But when Fort Hood was built there and the things were happening, training exercises, murders, suicides, whatever, then the place became very, very haunted. And I seen it over at Camp Beauregard in Louisiana, Fort Polk, Louisiana. I mean, I seen it everywhere. So military installations are haunted.
I also wonder, I believe it's Fort Hood, I'm confident of, has the black copters and the black.
Fort Campbell, that's Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I was stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky for a little while. I moved around a lot because I was in military intelligence, and also too, before that I was with CID Criminal Investigation Division. So I went to a lot of forts, and I was at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and up the road is Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and that's where you see your black helicopters, and those are called the Night Stalkers. So those Night Stalker helicopters are usually the ones around areas like Skinwalker Ranch or whatever, where there's cattle mutilations, UFOs seen. Here comes the black helicopters, unmarked.
Right. So, because the reason I was bringing up, I was thinking it was Fort Hood, is because there was reports with Stephenville being so, with the UFOs and everything, that somebody was saying, yeah, they thought they saw a black copter land at Fort Hood, and I was thinking, well, if those are operating in the area, can that affect the energy of the base with what they're doing?
I mean, it's possible, Michael. Um, the only thing, from what I've seen from military installations, when people say, "Hey, these barracks are haunted," why is the barracks haunted? It was Joe Blow, and he was killed in a training accident, and he haunts the barracks. So it seems like things that happen at those military installations that causes death is what makes it haunted.
All right, and that makes sense and everything, and I'm wondering too, with all your investigations, have you ever come across like the legendary, like say, woman in white phenomenon, or any of those types where they're like, hey, this is an omen of, and you're like, oh boy, now what do I do?
Well, there's a lot of legends of the lady in white. We've had lady in green, lady in red. So we get a lot of those stories, a lot of those type of legends. I mean, when I went to Belize, I'm right now working with the Discovery Channel's Expedition X with Josh Gates and those two investigators, because they're going to Belize. So they read my article and they got a lot of information from my article. And I talk about the Stone Lady. She also too wears all white, and she's seen climbing up the pyramid. And they believe, the legend is that she volunteered to be sacrificed. She was depressed because her lover cheated on her and stuff like that. So she volunteered to be sacrificed, climbs up the pyramid, and then people who've seen her, she vanishes. So I've done a lot of legends. Um, the ghost of Joaquin Marietta, uh, which happens to be the inspiration for Zorro. His ghost is seen in gold country outside of Sacramento, California. So people have seen that. Yeah, so there's a lot of, I've worked a lot of cases where there are legends. And there's a book right now called Chinese Camp. And Chinese Camp, you'll find one of my stories in there. Joaquin Marietta used to go to Chinese Camp. Black Bart, the gentleman bandit, he was seen at Chinese Camp, and his ghost is seen there. So, yeah, I've done a lot of legends. I even went to Billy the Kid's gravesite in New Mexico. So, and I've been to the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona, and all those areas are haunted.
I agree, and I've been to the Billy the Kid grave site in New Mexico, and the one thing that I found interesting was, like, they say the legend is that his grave is, he watches over all the money, so whatever money you throw there, he's never going to let it go. And
Right.
there was like bills in there and high wind, but the bills were not blowing away. And I was like, you can see them flap, and I was like, that is too cool. I
Huh.
don't know if it was paranormal or if, something was on it. I couldn't really tell because it was in between the two concrete tombs covers, and so, but still, it's like you look at that and it's like, yeah, this is just, I mean, you can hear the wind blowing by, but the paper is not moving, like not blowing away like you would expect.
See, Michael, we've both been to the same place, uh, which is Billy the Kid's gravesite in New Mexico. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe you can explain this with your military background. Was driving on the highway from Roswell to, I think it was Fort Stanton, is in the middle of this desert road. It's this total fenced in area that has no gate on it, that says if you want to gain access to this, you need to go to the nearest U.S. Air Force installation. And it's a satellite dish pointing not up to the sky, but pointing to the east.
What year was this?
It was about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago.
This is after you saw Billy the Kid's grave?
It was right before.
Before, okay.
We
Um,
were on the road going to the gravesite when we passed this on the road.
yeah. When I went to Billy the Kid's grave, the year was 1965. I was
Oh,
a
wow.
child. I went there with my father and my mother. So I didn't see what you saw. So, and maybe my dad did. We'll get him on the show and see. Hey, Dad, did you see this? Yeah, but anyway.
But no, it was like, if you imagine this dirt like road in between Roswell and Fort Stanton. And what was interesting is we got out and was walking around it a little bit in front, and you could hear the humming, the electric, and there's no cars around us. And we turn around and start walking to the car, and all of a sudden, this U.S. government construction vehicle, and we say U.S. government because that's what it was on the plate, drives by, and we're like, where did you come from? And we're like, let's get in the car, let's get out of here. I think we've overstayed our welcome.
So you went through Roswell to get to Billy the Kid's grave?
We were coming back from the Grand Canyon,
Oh, okay.
and so we went down to Roswell. We missed Tombstone. I forget. I think there was something going on that we needed to get back for, so we didn't have time for Tombstone. But we did a stopover in Roswell, and then drove over to Fort Stanton to see Billy the Kid, and then drove into Texas. But yeah, it was just strange seeing this satellite dish not pointing to the sky, just there, and no other buildings around it. It's not like, there was a base nearby or anything. It was like there was nothing.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. Now I'm just curious. My father, if he drove through Roswell. So next time I see him, I'm going to ask him, "Did you go through Roswell?" So, um, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So and a point of fact is if he did and he doesn't remember it, then we know that's a fairly new dish, or that's not something that's been there since Roswell.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because it does. I mean, if I was to describe it, it looks like those old, like, CSETI, not telescopes, the scanners that they use where they say, yeah, we're using this to beam the signal out, and they have all these dishes that point up to send the signal out. It looked like one of those.
Huh.
And that's why I was like, why isn't it pointing up?
Right.
It's trying to reach something. But so we're approaching an hour and a half.
Okay.
Is um is there any place that you want to share with us that you haven't shared yet, or
What? What?
that you've investigated at, or you've been to and had an experience?
Um, I think I covered all the main ones. Um, I mean, I investigated Mount Shasta. I did a Bigfoot hunt over there. We did wood on wood type communication. I hit a tree 3 times with a piece of wood because that's how Bigfoot communicate. And behind me, there was a rock thrown into the creek 3 times. And bears don't have their paws; they can't throw a rock.
Right.
So I actually believe that was Bigfoot. We also too had a psychic medium there named Holly DeLauder, and she was the secretary to Sylvia Brown, and
Oh, wow.
she too was a psychic, and she came with us to Mount Shasta. There was one point in time where she goes, "Paul, take a picture of me because there's something behind me." When I looked at the photo, you can see her, Holly DeLauder, but behind her was a tilted UFO, and that picture went viral um, uh, because it was so unique, and it was actually placed in Timothy Beckley's UFO book. So yeah, that was very interesting. Mount Shasta was very interesting. Um, I've investigated Monterey Bay because supposedly there's a underground UFO base in Monterey Bay, and people hear humming noises coming out of the bay, and they have no explanation for the humming noises. Um, um, I have tons of stories. You know,
Yeah,
we,
we'll definitely have to have you back on to share some
I
more.
mean, we could be here all night long, but yeah.
So one of the things I like to ask the guests when closing up for the episode is, based on your life experiences, it doesn't have to be through paranormal, dance, wherever you want to go with it. From, your life experience, what is one golden nugget that you would like to leave the audience with?
If you're a brand new paranormal investigator and you're curious, keep on going with it. Make sure you document your findings and your investigations so historians in the future can look back at it and see what you accomplished. If you don't, keep some type of record of it, there's no glory in that. So, and I see so many ghost hunters, they'll go, "Oh, there was a good investigation last night." Okay, but what did you investigate? Oh, it was confidential. Even if it's confidential, I've done investigations which the occupants don't want their name recorded. Well, just say it. Okay, I investigated so and so place, but you don't have to be specific. Record it, document it, and let the public know what you did because it's so important to get that information out because we're trying to learn what the paranormal is. And if you don't document it, we'll never know. So that's my advice.
Thank you. And thank you for trusting me to come onto the show.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. So, yeah. And if you guys want to, find who I am, all you have to do is Google or Bing me, Paul Dale Roberts. And if you want to see my books, Bing me, Google me, Paul Dale Roberts books, and you'll see all my books. So,
Okay, and I do have links in the description. And so if I'm missing any, let me know and I can edit them in. But thank you, and thank you to everyone who's watching. I greatly appreciate everyone, and thank you again, Paul, for being available on such short notice. I'm so grateful that you came on and shared with us what you have. And so, to everyone out there, I wish you a wonderful night, wonderful day, wonderful afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And as Paul pointed out, if you have an experience, document it because that's the beauty of life is that's one way to keep our memories and ourselves alive even when we're gone is to have a record in print or video or however you want to do it to show you were here. That is one way to keep your legacy alive. So, thank you to everyone and have a great night. Thank you.
thank you, Michael.
Thank you.